Welcome to Planet, People, Mining, Voices at the Crossroads of Mining, Communities, and Sustainability. I'm your host, Allison Koppel. I have over 20 years in this space in 5 mining companies. I then found myself in transition when this podcast emerged through reconnecting with my incredible network, whose insights may be heard as one-off episodes on other platforms, while here they take center stage. If you're also a trailblazer with stories from the field, a mining colleague curious about what these people even do, if you're interested in this field of impactful, motivating work, or from another industry, join us as we celebrate their contributions, demystify their roles, and explore the community and sustainability issues they tackle. And for our Spanish-speaking audience, busca Planet People Mining en Español. Today's episode is It Starts with the Person, the Social Performance Person, with Ana Maria Esteves. Ana's global experience began in her youth, growing up in Southern Africa and Europe, and also living in Australia, where she earned her MBA from the Melbourne Business School and PhD from the University of Melbourne. Ana has been at the forefront of economics, industries such as mining, and communities, and a leader in the field of social impact assessment. Founder and director of Community Insights Group consulting firm, we talk about how Ana's recent focus has shifted from strategy, assessment, and solving the issues to empowering the professionals in charge of building community relationships, and how executive coaching has been a game changer for her clients. It's wonderful to have you here with us, Ana. How are you today?
Thank you. I'm very well. Thanks for this opportunity, Alison.
That's great. Well, why don't you start off by introducing yourself? Beyond what I shared in your short bio, what are a few major life and work milestones?
Oh, well, what comes to mind, Alison, when you say milestones is all the times I've moved and the places I've called home and all of the changes that this has come with. So I was a kid when I moved from Mozambique to Zimbabwe to Portugal to Zimbabwe to South Africa. And I'm quite sure that this early migrant experience, it made me sensitive to difference and discrimination and displacement. But it also built some resilience, I know that. But after I started working, my decisions to move, they tended to be motivated by work that I didn't want to do, interestingly enough. You know, there's been a thread in these career choices, I guess. If I'm not free to work on transformational change, you know, on this topic of corporate community concerns, I get really bored.
You know, I had no idea that you spent your childhood in so many interesting places. This is making a lot of sense from when you and I first met. If I recall, it was years ago at a conference in Chile, and I remember I was immediately impressed of how deep and clear your questions were. I think I was giving a workshop, and you were a very good student, I think in the front row. And you immediately latched on to the material. And I said, this is a person who I know gets it and innately gets it. And so you just filled a few information holes that I had in my head. So what are you doing now? How would you describe your current role?
Well, firstly, to say the feeling was mutual at that. It was a training course you ran on local supplier development in Santiago. I remember that. And I was completely awestruck on how you took this very complex topic and you just broke it down into very practical, sort of bite-sized chunks. So now I lead this amazing team at Community Insights Group, and we're in the business of building capacity of project and corporate teams for social performance. So our mission hasn't changed over 2 decades since we've been around. It's about putting people at the center of how business is conducted. And it's very much our identity. It's even if you look at our logo, the I in the middle of CIG is a little person. So people-centered is something we keep thinking about. So we do this through two areas of work. The one is learning, and that's training, coaching, teams and one-on-ones and supporting peer learning. The second area is advisory, and here it's around human rights, livelihoods, benefit sharing, and preparing teams to meet international standards. We've changed our approach in recent years. We've gone from conducting assessments to supporting strategy and implementation. And there's a reason I'm sharing this. We weren't seeing clients were getting very far with this classic consulting model of, traffic light reports and plans and tools and guidances. We wanted to shift to start integrating action learning methods to the advisory work. So with on-the-job training and one-on-one and the team coaching. So instead of developing, your human rights due diligence action plan or your livelihood restoration plan or doing your social monitoring, we train in-house teams to do this. And if the project doesn't have one, a team will help them set it up. So it's so much more gratifying for us to be in this coach rather than a referee type of role, the holding up red cards. Don't get me wrong, I still believe you need the red cards, but we were seeing that many others were filling the space, and we wanted to do what we thought was core competency.
When you and I reconnected recently, you told me about your coaching practice, and I became very interested. Can you tell me a bit more about the coaching? What is it about the coaching practice? What does that really mean?
To answer that, let me go a step back as to why I got into this coaching practice. Alison, I know you've hired many consultants. You've been on the consulting side, so what I say may resonate with you. When you're a consultant, you're brought in to work on an explicit task, but actually a lot of the work that you do it involves in what hasn't been stated explicitly, and it's with dealing with the part of the iceberg that is below the surface and how your client uses you in this more, I guess, implicit role, whether it's as a sounding board or whether it's therapy or being a deflector shield. It says a lot about what's going on that can actually get in the way of the main task. So issues that have to do with their leadership, their relationship to authority, the dynamics in their team, the culture of, the organization, the way things are done, how they see their role, how others see their role, their personal motivations, their skills. There's so much happening. So I got to the point where this was happening so often, and I thought, oh, maybe I need to make that part of my work more explicit. Maybe I need to upskill in actually dealing with these things. So that's why a few years ago, I sort of, I thought, okay, I'll get myself some executive coaching training. And, while I might still do the training and advisory, but what is energizing me at the moment is this coaching, because the connections are deeper and I see more transformation happening, real time compared with, flying in, having these rushed engagements, collecting data, writing a report, push back, repeat. Having these one-on-one or sort of team-based spaces where people can come in and they're okay to take risks. They feel like it's safe. It's all about their learning and their growth and them taking responsibility.
So what I love what you just said and explained is that in your consulting practice, you're often brought in to deal with the issue that's at the tip of the iceberg, the issue that you see, but that it's through your work that you start to realize that the real issue is below the iceberg, and working with the person trying to lead the change within the organization. That's where the real work happens, and that you you leaned into this and you got training and realized there's a whole practice around coaching that allows you to work with this person. I find that so refreshing and so needed, because often the person trying to drive is in the community space, in say a mining company, it's it's sometimes a lonely job. You're often in the minority of thoughts and the minority of presence within a room, and you're trying to do often something different. So it really resonated with me when you started talking to me about how you leaned into developing a coaching practice.
Alison, you're spot on. And as you were talking, I was reminded by a theme that comes up a lot in the coaching is this, feeling like a lone voice. And what I hear is that often what motivates social performance practitioners to come into their role, it is this, commitment to social justice, equality, well-being of all project affected people. They have a sense of north, but they recognize that when their non-SP colleagues, they see them coming, this gets translated to, whoa, slower project timelines, getting in the way of the real work. And it gets very tiresome uh, if you're constantly having to justify your work through the lens of the business case or compliance. So these individuals, they end up, sort of retrofitting their their speech and using arguments they may not necessarily, believe in. So this is, what the psychologists talk about cognitive dissonance is, when the actions and beliefs, end up being inconsistent. And I've heard from someone who says when they go to work, they leave who they are at home. And I mean, I can't imagine that. This is a very tough space to be. So I have a lot of empathy with this group.
You touched on another point that I think is below the surface of the iceberg, is that often the person in the community relations role or social performance role at a site is from that community. That person, knows the community, they're comfortable there, and often this person is from that community. But you just touched on an extremely relevant issue that's not always talked about, is that this person can feel pulled in different directions, in goals of a company and goals of the community. And it's up to this person to make sense of it all and move into maybe a different goal or a merged goal. And that, going back to your realization that a lot of the work is individual and through your coaching, and how I assume you help this person through this real dilemma that I don't often heard talk about. It's
Yeah.
it's really a challenge in this type of work, and I think it's spot on that you've picked up on that and building a practice around it.
And listen, what you find is that, they make sense of their role. They may be working with people in communities who think their role is something else. They might be working with their peers who think their role is something else altogether. And, I'm sure you've heard the metaphor that's often applied of community relations people being the bridge, but when they in a coaching space, they might talk about, yes, I'm a bridge, but there is this tsunami flowing under me, and or I'm being sort of the two shores are sort of being pulled apart, and that's why recently been thinking about these professionals and thinking about, well, where is there this safe space that these people can actually come in and bring their dilemmas. They don't, they are on their own often, and it's not exactly this fully formed professional field where there's clear sort of structures where people can come, and get advice. So that's where my head is at the moment, is advocating for this group of professionals.
You're the advocate for the group of professionals. I love that. And
Yes.
what was the moment or moments when you realized that this is your calling, this is your career path? I mean, it started a long time ago in wanting to work with the interface of communities and companies, and then you've been specializing more and realizing to work with the person trying to drive this change. Was there a moment where you realized this is what I'm doing?
Where did it start? It wasn't one day. I got into SIA, Social Impact Assessment, in what was boom time, Australia, uh, for the mining sector. Maybe because I was, initially trained as an economist, or I lived in a mining region in South Africa. I was particularly interested in the benefit side of the equation, which is how I ended up having an interest in, local procurement, supply development. But of course, you can't deal with benefits without firstly dealing with harm. And unfortunately, I've spent much more time on the harm than I would have liked. But these days, it's definitely the other way around. There was another turning point that comes to mind too, undoubtedly. And this was being invited by a Professor Marcia Langton in Australia to present on my PhD research. And I remember it was a conference sponsored by Rio Tinto on agreement making with Aboriginal people. But I'm so indebted to Marcia and to Bruce Harvey for having introduced me to her. At that same conference, I met Professor David Brereton. He was heading the Centre for Social Responsibility in Mining. And he gave me opportunities, and which sort of nudged me into the sweet spot of having one foot in consulting and one foot in academia. And it was also around about this time, and through the research, I met a professor, Frank Van Clay, an academic in the field of social impact assessment. And very soon after, I figured he would make a very good husband, and our career paths have they're completely intertwined, even though we don't work formally together. But it's very difficult to separate the two.
That part of the story I wasn't expecting. You and I had a professional relationship, but those are the real stories that define our life is when we meet a person that we can go on this journey with. That's wonderful. I also have to recognize David Breton was so fundamental to my career early on as well in the Center
Oh
for
yeah,
Social Responsibility in Mining. Let's go back to the what we were talking about before you went backwards, a bit on your current work in this coaching practice. Dig a little deeper. When you work with a client or a company, and you suggest layering on top, or maybe you don't suggest, maybe it's just naturally integrated into your work, but you bring this this coaching practice into your work. Is it always well understood? Is there anything that's often misunderstood about your role?
yes. So absolutely, and I must say, even myself, when before I, you know, went and upskilled in coaching, I had a certain view of what it was that, it didn't end up being. So it is a topic that there are many definitions. So it's completely understandable and especially if people have had their own experience with coaches. The model is, that I promote, and of course it's going to have some academic theory behind it. It's the system psychodynamic approach, and it's different to mentoring, which mentoring is often a relationship between someone more experienced, someone in sort of early mid career, and there is an age and seniority difference, and there's advice given. A coach is also not someone who gives you advice. The coaching model that I adhere to is someone who basically works one on one with you on your dilemma and helps you look at it from different angles and tries to uh, help you look at it from an angle of, and this is where the systems approach comes in, to think about you, your motivations, your skills, but also looking at issues around the clarity of your role, what others think about your role, whether it is clear, work with your team and the dynamics of the team, how issues relating to organizational culture, how all of these things are working together to contribute to a particular dilemma that you're in. So it's not an advisory role. I don't usually recommend not coaching anybody that you know, because it is quite a different role. If people have seen you as a consultant or a specialist, that it's so easy for them to sort of continue, expect to continue seeing you in that role. So, for instance, with one mining client, we have someone on the team who is the coach and a separate person on the team who is the trainer, the expert that is doing the on the job training. And so this is a team that is being tasked to implement an FPIC process. The team has been on the ground for many, many years and have never had to think about FPIC. And now, there are these new requirements that say, they need to go out and get FPIC. So that they are getting training, then they make sense of what they're going to do differently in response to the training. They bring that into a team coaching space where they have the support from the coach, and then they go back into the ground. They have more on the job training. So it's what we call this action learning circle, but it separates, and makes both of these tasks explicit. Another example is simply, to offer one-on-one coaching to social performance leaders, and they can bring in any dilemma into the sessions, and it's a number of sessions, and it's linked to their leadership development. Another scenario can be instead of hiring a consultant to come in and do it, then our approach would be, okay, well, we'll coach your manager so that your manager is actually um, uh, equipped to work with their team to develop up the team's competency development plan. So it's designed to build, to have the ownership and have the accountability from the start.
I love the example you just gave on FPIC because one, I've never met a coach and I've worked with several coaches over my career. I find the practice extremely helpful. They have helped me to see the organization which I work differently and build relationships differently. But I've never been able to explain to a coach that I've worked with, I'm working on this FPIC issue, and that they know that FPIC means free, prior, informed consent, and that it is a ongoing process to seek consent from Indigenous peoples where the mine site or where the project is. And I also like how you explained, though, that even though you come from a social performance background, you truly understand the on the ground issues, challenges, and realities, that the coaching practice is a different line of work and should be a different line of work. It is not the technical advice, even though you work alongside with professionals on the technical advice, that it is a complementary practice to enable success through this on the ground challenge. And so to me, that is so unique. But I didn't realize how necessary it is to separate out the coaching from the technical advice because they are different sides of the iceberg. One is what you
Yes.
are seeing at the top, and one truly is understanding the motivations and what you are not seeing. So I thought that example is brilliant as you explain this practice and how you bring it together. One more question to you. Social performance professionals and social performance being in this podcast, we have used a number of words to describe a person, usually within a company, who interacts with the community as their main job: social performance, community engagement, community relations. I know the industry has trouble coming up with one solid word. So, social performance professional, what advice do you have for them?
I am a big believer in investing in your professional network. It takes hard work, and especially if for the introverts out there, or people who are so consumed with their day jobs and life. So it takes hard work, and but it takes a long term view, and generosity with your connections, and reciprocity. That's really important. If you're going to have influence, if you're going to build um, your safe space that you can bring your dilemmas into it, it's really important. Building a professional network, it's about building, trusting relationships, and we should know that, SP people, this is what they do. It's an essential competency. But, what does it take to build trust? It's when people know, what you stand for, and they think you're skilled, and, you treat them with respect, and you keep your word. So, we think about applying that to our external stakeholders, but it's I think it's really important with our peers. The safe space, somewhere where you can sort of be challenged, you can learn and grow, and take risk. And if it's a coach, great. It can be a mentor. It can be with peers inside or outside your workplace. But, as long I think, give it some structure, have it as a recurring, space in your calendar. And it's ultimately about your growth.
I think that's so key what you just said, because earlier you shared that this is not the work with community social performance. It's not as established a discipline as other disciplines within industry. And so it is so key for the professional to be proactive to building the network within the discipline. One, it's not going to be given to you. Like, this is the club that you're supposed to join. There's no real club, as I found. I've had to build my club. And this is such unique
Yeah,
work. And that's also
so
why I started this podcast, is because I, in the last few months, have been intensely reconnecting with my network and having wonderful conversations where immediately I feel connected to a person or reconnected to the person because of this unique shared experience that we've had professionally on the ground working with communities and its interface and their interface with industry. It is such a unique experience that when we find each other, it's this zing that at least
yes, yes,
you get me. So that's why I
yes,
bring to light this network that I've developed of people who at least get me and
that's
hopefully
right.
get each other. So I think that's brilliant. Well, listen, I've enjoyed so much learning more about you, more about your practice and the important work you're doing, not just in the field and for the profession, but for the people who are working in this unique profession. So thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you so much, Alison. You're wonderful for having set up this podcast.
Absolutely. Take good care. Thank you for joining us. If you like what you heard, please like, provide a 5-star review, and amplify.